Long before Cole McGrath became the Beast, he, like many of us, was a simple young man looking for adventure. After deciding to drop out of college mainly so he could piss off his parents, Cole would become a bike messenger and would work alongside his best friend Zeke and his girlfriend Trish and would deliver packages across Empire City. However, one day while Cole was in the middle of one of his regular deliveries, he would receive a phone call from an unknown man offering him some extra money to open the package that he was carrying. Cole agreed to this, and as he opened up the package, it was revealed to be a strange device that suddenly activated, causing a massive explosion which destroyed several blocks of Empire City and killed everyone within its blast radius. However, Cole somehow survived. After succumbing from his injuries and passing out, Cole awoke from a 4-day coma at Empire City's hospital, where Cole, Trish, and Zeke witnessed that Cole had somehow been granted electrokinesis powers, allowing him to absorb and distribute electricity. Cole quickly grew a liking to his new powers, and over a short period of time would even learn to control his powers at will. Over the course of his adventures, Cole would have random encounters with a mysterious man named Kessler, who seemed to know Cole in a very personal way. Cole and Kessler would have their final battle in the crater of the Ray Sphere Blast, and after a hard-fought battle, Cole would emerge victorious, only to discover that Kessler was an older version of himself who had traveled through time in order to prepare his younger self to battle a powerful being simply known as the Beast. A month after Cole McGrath defeated Kessler, he would meet with an NSA agent named Lucy, who informed Cole that he had to travel to the city of New Marais in order to enhance his powers. However, it was at that very moment that the Beast would appear out of nowhere, and after attempting to battle the Beast head-to-head, Cole would be defeated, and after barely surviving his fight with the Beast, he would be recovered from his friend Zeke on a boat to New Marais, only to be forced to watch as the Beast would completely destroy Empire City. After arriving in New Marais, Cole would be informed that the Beast was able to sense his location and was making his way from the destroyed ruins of Empire City all the way to New Marais and was destroying everything in its path. Needing to enhance his powers greatly to get ready for his rematch against the Beast, Cole would battle the local mutants that had infested the city before Cole had arrived there, and during which a mysterious plague appeared across the city, causing many civilians to get sick with no idea of how to cure them. Eventually, Cole would meet up with John White, who had supposedly died during the time that Cole was in Empire City, and he revealed himself to actually be the Beast himself. John explained that he was awakening the powers of dormant conduits, who were the only individuals who were immune to the plague, and asked Cole to join him. Seeing no other option, Cole alongside Lucy agreed to help John destroy the RFI device, which was the only device that could harm them, but in the process cost the lives of the entire city's militia force and forced Cole to have to kill his friends Nix and Zeke. With the RFI device destroyed, John White saw it as the perfect moment to transfer his powers to Cole and allow him to continue the plan to awaken the dormant powers of the conduits around the world, even at the cost of innocent human lives, thereby becoming the Beast himself. Delson was a young street artist who spent most of his time marking buildings around his community as a form of self-expression. However, this constant marking and acts of illegal activities would put him at odds with his older brother Reggie, who happened to be an officer for their community, forcing him to have to arrest Delson on multiple occasions. One day, Delson and Reggie would witness the crash of a military convoy where a trio of conduits would escape, and after a small standoff with one of the escaping conduits, Delson would accidentally end up absorbing the powers of one Hank Daughtry, revealing that Delson too was a conduit, and he would chase Hank into the custody of the DUP. After being interrogated by the leader of the DUP, Brooke Augustine, who also seemed to be a conduit who could use her own powers to control concrete to incapacitate others, Delson would awake a week later to discover that many of the civilians of his tribe had been badly injured by Augustine's powers, and the only way that he could save them would be to absorb Augustine's powers to reverse the injuries that she had caused them. Choosing to chase down Augustine, Delson and Reggie would make their way to Seattle, Washington, and it was there that they would discover that the DUP had taken total control of the entire city and its districts and were arresting those who were believed to be conduits so that they could be shipped off to prison camps. Declaring war on Augustine and the DUP forces, Delson would eventually find himself encountering the two other escaped conduits, Abigail Walker and Eugene Sims from the military convoy that crashed in Delson's village, and after battling and absorbing their powers, would form an alliance with them, recognizing that the three of them had similar goals, and together the three would battle the DUP and weaken their control over the city. Delson would eventually run into Hank Daughtry, who somehow had escaped Augustine's custody, and he would convince Delson and Reggie to team up with him in order to rescue Abigail and Eugene, who had been recaptured by Augustine and had been taken to a DUP island base. As the three of them infiltrated the base, it would be revealed that Hank was actually working for the DUP, who he had agreed to betray Delson in exchange for his freedom. As Delson and Reggie were forced back, the two would be knocked off the side of a ledge, where Augustine would attempt to encase both Delson and Reggie in concrete. However, Reggie would sacrifice himself, letting go of Delson, allowing him to escape. Seeking revenge, Delson would hunt down Hank, but would not kill him, understanding that he was forced to betray him and would let Hank go. Teaming up with Abigail and Eugene, the three would plan a final assault on Augustine and her forces, and after fighting his way up the DUP headquarters building, Delson would confront Augustine and would defeat her, successfully absorbing her powers, and after defeating Augustine, Delson would return to his village where he would heal all the civilians there who had been injured by Augustine. Well, what's up again there guys, Brian here at 3TR, and I would just like to apologize for keeping you guys waiting for this rematch. But December was a real nightmare for me, having me stacked with a bunch of different projects both for the channel and in my personal life. But going into 2017, I'm hoping to have more free time to get these Versus Series matchups uploaded more frequently. So to kick off the new year, I'm here to present my first ever rematch Versus Series matchup, as I'll be pitting Cole McGrath against Delson. However, this time, their karma roles have been reversed. Before I begin, I would just like to clarify right now that this matchup will be a head-to-head showdown between these two characters as they are at the end of their respective endings. So Cole McGrath, in essence, will have access to all of his powers and physical traits that he had gained over the course of his time throughout the infamous franchise, including the powers and traits granted to him from the Beast. And as for Delson, I'll be granting him access to all of his powers as well, this time even giving him full access to his concrete powers, which I felt would not play a major factor during my first matchup involving these two. But seeing how much of a colossal challenge this is going to be for Delson, he's going to need all the powers he can get his hands on. Now, to avoid the length that the previous matchup presented, this matchup is going to be structured significantly differently. Physical capabilities will not be analyzed due to the fact that all the physical traits that were granted to Cole from the Beast would clearly give him the edge in that department. Seeing how the Beast could survive taking a tactical nuke to the face and keep pressing on if not affected, I don't really see any reason to argue that Cole would have the physical edge over Delson. Weapons will also not be analyzed because by the end of Infamous 2, Cole had abandoned the use of the amp, while Delson would still have his 3-foot metal chain. So I guess you could give Delson the edge in the weapons department, but against this Cole, I really don't think it's going to change anything. And in terms of their battle tactics, Cole really doesn't need to rely on any unique tactical approaches because when you have enough power to destroy entire cities, you don't really need to be creative. And for Delson, even with this fight taking place in Seattle this time around, he is going to be going into this fight with no prep time and no real game plan, and would just be trying to go head to head, and that's not really much of a tactic. So this match is going to be judged and decided upon based on each combatant's collection of powers and how they will use them. So with that out of the way, let us begin by comparing these two based off their powers. Over the course of his life, Cole McGrath as a conduit had grown to become not just one of, but eventually the single most powerful conduit who had ever lived. He would be granted a series of powers over the course of his life, with his first set of primary powers being his use of electrokinesis and electromagnetism. With electrokinesis, this granted Cole the ability to not only channel lightning in and out of his body, but it also allowed Cole to manipulate any forms of electronic currents. Cole was also able to use this ability in a series of creative ways, including being able to create physical constructs like gigawatt blades and other physical weapons to aid him in combat. His primary multi-range attack was the ability to fire bolts of lightning that could be fired off in a series of different ways, including an overload burst blast, which could not only damage an opponent but conduct to multiple surfaces, causing explosions, to being able to slow down a person to precisely fire bolt shots like sniper rifle shots. His Alpha Blast attack could fire off kinetic shockwaves, which could not only knock enemies off their feet, but could also be used in a defensive manner to repel firing objectives and projectile attacks back off the shooter. He could also use his electrokinesis to allow himself to glide across power lines to recharge him in the process, as well as being able to use his power to give him a temporary thruster boost for great mobility. His lightning tether ability allowed Cole to repel himself to any physical surface he attached himself to, giving him even more maneuvering flexibility. Two of Cole's more unique abilities with this power as well was his ability to not only heal himself, but with others with use of electronic charge. But more dangerous was he had the ability to absorb the bioelectronic energy in humans, literally being able to turn a person's body off, killing them instantly. He may also have been granted the use of his ability to use a radar pulse, which allowed him to see all the forms of electronic currents that he could absorb, replenishing his powers. His use of electromagnetism gave Cole a form of telekinesis, which allowed him to lift metallic items and fire them like projectiles like Magneto from the X-Men franchise. After arriving in New Marais, Cole would discover a power transfer device which would allow him to gain the powers of one of his allies. Choosing Nyx, Cole would be granted the power of napalm manipulation, and this ability allowed him to warp fire and flammable substances such as oils or napalms, allowing him to use them against his enemies. With all three of these different powers working together, Cole had access to three different devastating ionic attacks. The first one which linked to his electrokinesis was dubbed Ionic Storm, which allowed him to call down a powerful bolt of lightning down from the sky onto an opponent. The attack linked to his electromagnetism was dubbed Ionic Vortex, which allowed Cole to generate and unleash a tornado infused with kinetic energy. And the attack linked to his napalm manipulation was dubbed Ionic Drain, which initially allowed Cole to drain the life force of all enemies standing around him, and its power was so devastating that his enemies would be turned into red mist, leaving their corpses smoking on the ground. After joining forces with John White, who was revealed to be the Beast, and after successfully destroying the RFI device, John would transfer all of his powers into Cole, making him even more powerful. Now becoming the Beast, he was granted even more abilities that elevated his level of power far beyond that of any conduit who had ever lived before and since. As the Beast, he was granted the powers of Pyrokinesis, which granted Cole the ability to control fire with his mind, along with having the ability to throw fireballs and shockwave fire at his opponents. Telepathy, which could allow Cole the ability to talk directly into a person's mind, and in some cases could possibly read a person's thoughts and intentions. An ability called Giant, which allowed Cole to absorb matter to grow into a gigantic lava-like being, expanding and improving upon all of his abilities, adding a bonus which could cause the sky to turn red while Cole was in this form. Anti-gravity released a wave of energy which could instantly nullify the effects of gravity within its surrounding, though this ability does take some time to concentrate. Vacuum allowed him to create a localized black hole in his palm, allowing him to absorb matter. Regeneration, which allowed Cole to absorb matter to heal any injuries that he may have sustained, releasing a destructive shockwave in the process. However, while he's in his giant form, Cole's injuries could become more apparent with the more damage that he took over the course of a battle, causing multiple parts of his body part to fall off or disintegrate, requiring him more time to heal. He was also granted the ability to perform teleportation for mobility, which is the transfer of matter or energy from one point to another without transferring the physical space between them. The power known as Control allowed Cole the ability to amplify and even weaken any nearby conduit's abilities, and as it was shown during Cole's first engagement against the Beast, this ability could be so effective against energy-based powers, as long uses of this powers not only crippled all of Cole's powers, but he was stripped of them for weeks and placed in a coma, and forced Cole to have to rebuild his strength with his powers from scratch when he got to New Marais. But the most powerful and most dangerous ability given to Cole was the same ability that John White could use to destroy entire cities, and that was the use of his Ray Fear Blast. With this ability, Cole can channel a large amount of ray field energy into a powerful explosion similar to that of the Ray Sphere Blast, activating potential conduits while killing any nearby normal humans. The explosive power of a ray field blast attack would be similar to that of the ones that took place in Empire City in New Moray, capable of destroying large sections of city very quickly, and though this ability would not kill any nearby conduits, it would be more than powerful enough to knock them out for great periods of time, possibly placing nearby conduits to fall into a coma. With the combination of Cole's primary 3 powers and all the powers that were granted to him by John White, there was no question that by the end of Infamous 2, Cole McGrath had become the most powerful being that anyone had ever seen. Now, going into Delson's powers, I would like to state that due to the nature of one of Delson's powers and how he requires it, I will be giving Delson a little bit of help in order to give him some aid against such overwhelming odds. Not only will Delson have access to all 4 of his base powers, but as well as in this matchup, I will not be forcing him to have to go to specific sources of that power in order to switch them out. However, he will be forced to have to go to that specific source in order to recharge that power. So with that out of the way, after discovering that he was a conduit with the power to absorb the abilities of others through contact, Delson collected a series of different abilities over the course of Infamous Second Son. The first and his primary power was his ability to manipulate smoke. With this, Delson could shoot projectiles of smoke out of his hand and could even turn his body into a quick dash of smoke, allowing him to travel quickly throughout the city. He could also deploy smoke grenades which could explode and have a covering effect to enemies, which could act as the ability to incapacitate them in combat. The second power that Delson gained after absorbing it from Abigail Walker was the ability to manipulate a neon-like energy. His ability to manipulate neon-like energy came with many similar functions and attacks like his smoke manipulation powers did, but instead Delson could fire off neon stream laser shots from his hands, which could blow up upon contact and could deal more damage to his enemies than his smoke projectiles attacks could. Though the offensive attack of Delson's neon powers seemed to be more based off precision attacks than anything else, his third power that he absorbed from Eugene Sims was the ability to manipulate video transmissions, and with this, Delson could shoot out streams of pixelated projectiles in rapid-fire motion at his enemies, along with having the ability to transform himself into a fainted pixel form, allowing him to become invisible to enemies for a certain period of time. His final power that he gained from Augustine was the ability to manipulate concrete, which could only be drained from a downed enemy of the DUP if he ever came across one. While using this power, Delson could shoot off a burst of concrete shrapnel projectiles in a burst fire manner, as well as being able to fire off slabs of concrete very similar to the ones that Augustine would use in her attacks. A universal technique that each power granted Delson was the ability to give him a thruster boost in midair, similar to how Cole uses his powers to grant him temporary flight. Though each power did have its own unique variation of this function that allowed him to move throughout the environments of the city very easily, as smoke could allow him to shoot up through the roof, through the vents of a building, neon could allow him to transform his body into a bodily form of neon energy, allowing him to scale the environment at exceptional speeds. Video granted him a set of pixelated wings that Delson could use for temporary flight across specific terrains, and concrete allowed Delson to completely coat his body in a concrete form, allowing him to charge through environments very quickly with a heavy thrust push. Now, similar to Cole McGrath's ionic attacks for each of his variation of powers, Delson too also had access to such devastating attacks that utilized each unique power. When applying smoke, Delson's main finisher was dubbed the Orbitable Drop, which allowed Delson to soar into the orbit-like heights and then crash into the ground, causing a massive explosion which could destroy everything on the ground in the immediate vicinity. When channeling his neon powers, Delson could use his ability known as Radiant Sweep, in which Delson fired a burst form of shockwaves, levitating enemies around him and then rapidly showering them in the area with neon bolts and exploding upon contact. And finally, when applying his video powers, he could use an ability called Hellfire Swarm, which summoned hordes of pixelated demons to fly into the area and attack enemies, with being able to destroy everything in the immediate area. Despite having all of these abilities at Delson's disposal, he did have one serious weakness. In essence, Delson's greatest strength could also become his greatest weakness, and that was being his ability to absorb the powers and memories of conduits that he touched. When Delson touches another conduit, he not only absorbs the powers and memories, but in response he loses access to all of his powers unless he can find and absorb a collection of energy shards, which sadly he will not have in this matchup. And without his powers, Delson would be left completely vulnerable. And before anyone makes the argument that Delson was able to absorb Abigail Walker's powers with no difficulty, one must remember that he needed to find power shards after absorbing Eugene and Augustine's powers, leading me to the theory that the more powers that he absorbs, the more power shards that he needs to retrieve in order to reactivate his collection of powers. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 25th Versus Series matchup that I have created, and never before have I had a matchup be so one-sided that it's almost criminal. But for all of you Delson fans out there, let's not bullshit ourselves. There is no way in hell Delson is winning this fight. There is no way in hell he could ever win this fight. And the simple fact is that no matter how hard you try to deny it, Delson not only lacks the combative might to take down Beast Mode Cole McGrath, he lacks any means of permanently taking Cole down. And on top of that, none of his powers will really help him in a head-to-head contest against Beast Mode Cole. Let's run down the ways. Number 1, Delson's smoke powers are completely pointless in this matchup. Not only does Cole McGrath have the power of pyrokinesis at his disposal, but he is completely immune to any fire-based powers. And even Delson's most powerful attack, the orbital drop, would be nothing more but suicidal on Delson's part, as Nyx tried to pull off a similar attack like that, and it did nothing more but get herself killed. So we can take smoke off the table. Number 2, let's go on to his neon and video powers. These would be just as useless as well, as Cole has the perfect combination to negate both of these powers at once, having learned from personal experience that the combination of his anti-gravity, vacuum, and control abilities. Anti-gravity is going to stop Delson in his tracks immediately because now he's floating in mid-air and he has no solid ground in order to direct his movements. Vacuum is going to pull Delson directly into Cole's hand, and as Cole is crushing Delson to death, he would be performing control, which would actively be damaging Delson's use of his energy-based powers. And even if by some miracle Delson was able to fire off shots directly into Cole's face, thereby breaking his grip, his powers would be actively weakened to the point where there would be of very little use. That would leave Delson left only with his concrete powers to fall back on, and if he is fighting an opponent whose powers are at least 10 times more powerful than his own, and has the ability to teleport, read his mind, and destroy entire sections of cities in mere seconds, and can incinerate anyone that gets close to him, what the hell could Delson possibly do? And now let's answer the elephant in the room that I'm sure many of you will try to throw at me in defense of Delson, and that is Delson's ability to copy the powers of other conduits. I'm going to say this right off the back. This ability could never work against someone like Cole McGrath as the Beast, because Delson would be facing not just one of the most powerful conduit, but he would be facing the single most powerful and dangerous conduit who has ever lived. You can't even argue the fact that Cole McGrath was more powerful as the Beast than John White was. The only reason that Cole McGrath was even able to survive becoming the Beast was because John had to change the molecular structure of Cole's body so that his body could contain the amount of power that was being transferred into him. Delson has had a hard enough time absorbing the powers of one conduit, and it has caused him to lose access to all of his powers until he could get his hands on power shards. If he tries this stunt against Cole, he would certainly die because his body just could not handle the magnitude of power and the multitude of powers that Cole has at his disposal. And even if Delson could successfully absorb all of Cole's powers at once, Cole's ability to read his mind and use the ability of telepathy would not only allow Delson to not be able to get even close enough to him, but he could simply teleport and use his Rayfair blast and attack at a distance, and it would guarantee that Cole could simply destroy the entire city with Delson within it. And even if the blast didn't kill Delson, he would certainly be knocked out and left unconscious, which would leave him exposed to simply be executed by Cole right then and there. Now, just to go off track a little bit involving their tactical approaches, in a head-to-head engagement like this, Cole really doesn't even have to be very tactical at all, as his only goal would be to kill Delson at any cost, and he would achieve this by destroying everything. As Cole is comparable to a walking, talking miniature nuclear explosion. He doesn't even need to be very precise with his methods. Just drop him off in the general area of the target and let his overwhelming powers do the rest of the work. As for Delson, there is no tactical approach that he could come up with that would prove to be of any use, because overwhelming an opponent as powerful as Beast Mode Cole McGrath would be simply impossible. This is something that not even Cole McGrath himself could pull off, as the entire final battle against the Beast in the official canon storyline was nothing more but one long delaying tactic. Cole knew that he could never defeat the Beast in a straightforward offensive approach, so working alongside Nyx and the entire Numerai militia force, the goal was simply to slow the Beast down and lead him to a specific location. Once Zeke had finished repairing the RFI device, Cole would then use his powers at their maximum in order to injure the Beast, which will allow him the time he needed to activate the RFI, killing himself, the Beast, and any other conduits throughout the world. So even if Delson was successful at using his powers at his maximum and was successful at injuring Cole, this would do nothing more but slow Cole down, as he would quickly regenerate and the battle would continue. When all is said and done, this is without question the one fight within the infamous franchise that Delson could never even hope to win. And for any of the Delson fanboys attack me in the comments stating this matchup favors Cole too much because he has all the powers of the Beast, even if you keep Cole's powers in its base form before Giant White transferred his powers to Cole, you would simply get a similar outcome to the first matchup between Cole McGrath and Delson, but the roles would be simply reversed. Instead of Cole being on the defensive, he will be on the offensive. Delson has shown success against opponents when the engagements are taking place in a confined, closed-off area, but when you have an entire section of a city to explore, the advantage goes to the opponent who is willing to use as many outlets as they can to advantage, and even Cole would have no issue causing massive amounts of collateral damage. And what's worse is that if Cole manages to find the main power center and completely drains the entire power grid for one section of a city, then Delson is fighting a souped up Cole McGrath that has cut off Delson's means to properly access his video and neon powers, because both sources need electricity in order to function. In the end, Delson lacks the overall combative flexibility and combative might to take down Beast Mode Cole McGrath. And it is for these reasons that I not only give Cole McGrath the edge in powers, but declare Cole McGrath, the Beast, the winner. And this concludes my first ever Versus Series rematch, as well as my final infamous theme matchup. To agree that Cole McGrath as the Beast is simply too powerful, or do some of you truly believe that Delson could pull off what Cole McGrath could never do, and that is defeat the most powerful conduit who has ever lived? Share your thoughts with me and everyone else in the comments down below, and for all of you Delson fans out there, please be aware that I am in no way a Delson hater. I rather much enjoyed playing Infamous Second Son and would be more than happy to see him return in a good follow-up game. And as I stated in my original take of this matchup, if Delson were fighting good Cole and this fight took place in Seattle and he was aware of Cole's serious weakness to water, Delson would certainly win. And I do spend a great deal of time analyzing all the possible ways that each combatant could win each matchup as I upload them, simply going with the more likely outcome. But if any of you do think that Delson could take down Beast Mode Cole McGrath on his own, I'll be more than happy to read your explanations in the comments down below. And if you like this Versus Series matchup, please feel free to like and subscribe to keep track of me at my future matchups and other videos. And like always, thank you guys for watching, you're awesome, and here's a preview of my next Versus Series matchup.